Yet so few ever pause to ask, what does happiness truly mean? Is it in wealth, in recognition, in pleasure, or is it something deeper, something already within us, waiting to be discovered? Happiness is often misunderstood as the mere possession of wealth, that once they achieve certain goals, buy certain things, or gain the admiration of others, they will finally find happiness. Yet when those achievements arrive, the joy is fleeting, and soon the mind is restless again. The truth is that happiness in its deepest sense is not dependent on external possessions or temporary satisfactions. Happiness, in the true sense, is the peace that arises from within, on circumstances, but flows naturally when craving and restlessness no longer dominate the heart. The restless mind is always reaching forward or backward. It remembers the past with regret or longing. In doing so, it loses contact with the only reality that actually exists, which is the present moment. A mind caught in restlessness is like a monkey jumping from branch to branch, never still, never content, never at ease. The teachings of inner peace show us that happiness is not something to be chased, but something to be uncovered by calming the turbulence of the mind. Craving is the great deceiver that promises satisfaction, but never delivers it fully. Releases pleasures or ideas, it does so with the belief that once attained, fulfillment will follow. Yet, when the object of desire is achieved, the joy fades and the hunger grows again. This cycle of craving creates suffering. Never whole, always searching for the next thing to fill the void. The recognition that this endless craving cannot provide true happiness is the beginning of wisdom. When the grip of craving loosens, space opens within the heart for peace to settle. It is the tendency to hold tightly to what is pleasing and to resist what is displeasing. But life is in constant motion and nothing remains the same. People change, conditions change, the body changes, and the seasons of life come and go. When we cling to impermanent, we set ourselves up for inevitable sorrow. For when the object of attachment shifts or disappears, as it surely will, the heart feels torn and distressed. It means abandoning love or joy, but learning to hold them gently, without possession, knowing they too are part of the flowing river of existence. Restless is another obstacle to happiness. Stay simplicity of the moment. It is always dissatisfied with what is. It longs for what could be or grieves for what has been lost. This agitation makes peace impossible, for it denies the sufficiency of the present. Mindfulness, when attention is rooted firmly in the present moment, the mind begins to taste calmness. The breath, the body, the sensations, and the awareness of being alive here and now are enough. In this sufficiency, happiness is found in the simple acceptance of what is. True happiness is therefore not a possession to be earned, nor is it an event to be reached in the future. It is the natural condition of a heart that is free, calm, and unburdened. Then when the chains of attachment loosen, and when the restlessness of the mind fades into stillness, happiness reveals itself like the clear sky after storm clouds have passed. It was always there, hidden by the turbulence of desires and fears. It's only to be uncovered. This understanding can be practiced in everyday life. In the midst of ordinary experiences, one can notice the subtle movements of craving, attachment, and restlessness. When eating a meal, or it may cling to the flavors fearing their end. But if one eats with mindfulness, appreciating each bite without grasping for more, contentment naturally arises. When interacting with others, the mind may become restless, but with awareness, one can see these patterns and let them go, finding ease in the simple act of being present with another human being. The cultivation of peace is also deeply connected with moral living. When the heart acts with kindness, honesty, there is no burden of guilt, no fear of being discovered in deception, no shadow of harm done to others. Ethical living creates a foundation upon which inner peace can rest securely. In contrast, when actions are driven by greed, hatred, happiness arises not from selfish gain, but from living in harmony with what is good and beneficial for all. Meditation plays an essential role in uncovering inner peace. By sitting quietly and observing the breath and the flow of thoughts, the practitioner learns to see craving, attachment, and restlessness for what they are, passing states of mind. In that observation, without judgment or suppression, the grip of these forces begins to loosen, and the natural peace of the mind shines through. Meditation is not an escape from the world, but a training to see the world clearly, to respond with wisdom rather than react with craving or aversion. Promises happiness, but delivers only temporary relief. A new possession may bring joy for a day, a week, or a month, but eventually the excitement fades. Relationships too can bring joy, but when clung to with attachment, even the body, when pampered and decorated, provides fleeting pleasure, but inevitably declines with age and sickness. To base happiness on these impermanent things is to build on sand, which lasting happiness can stand. Happiness in this sense is not dependent on perfect circumstances. A person may live simply without wealth or recognition, yet experience a joy far greater than one who has riches but a restless heart. In the quiet joy of a heart that has stopped chasing illusions and has found rest in the truth of the present, this peace cannot be taken away by loss or change, for it is not built on external things but arises from freedom within. The restless chase for satisfaction outside ourselves is endless and unsatisfying. Freedom from craving is not a loss but a liberation, for it opens the way to a happiness that is not conditioned, not fragile, and not fleeting. Of dwelling in simplicity, of living with compassion and clarity. This is the happiness that all beings long for, though many search for it in the wrong places. It is not far away, for it is always here, and fire revealed in stillness and peace. In the search for happiness, most people turn to the things of the world. They believe that possessions, status, relationships, or achievements will provide the lasting joy they seek. The long-desired object is obtained, or when success is achieved, there is indeed a spark of pleasure. Yet soon after, that feeling fades and the heart longs for something else. This cycle is one of constant pursuit and constant disappointment. And because they are impermanent, they cannot provide the kind of happiness that endures. To see this clearly is to take the first step toward discovering a deeper and truer form of joy. Consider the joy of acquiring something new. When it is saving for a desired possession, and when it is finally obtained, excitement arises. But as days pass, that object becomes ordinary, and the joy that once felt so bright begins to fade. In the driveway becomes another thing that needs washing and repair. The new house, once so impressive, becomes familiar, and with familiarity the thrill diminishes. Because the objects themselves have changed, but because the human mind grows accustomed and the freshness of novelty disappears. Thus, even the most delightful possessions lose their power to please once they are no longer new. One may strive to be admired, to rise in rank, or to be praised by others. When the recognition comes, it feels sweet, as though happiness has finally been secured. But that happiness is fragile. Tomorrow, and the position of honor may be taken by another. Status is built on shifting sands, and its rewards are never permanent. Those who cling to reputation are often anxious, fearing its loss, and in that fear, to depend on the approval of others for happiness is to tie one's joy to forces that can never be controlled. Worldly pleasures are also bound by the truth of impermanence, because all conditions change. Is itself subject to decay and sickness. The senses that delight in music, beauty, will one day weaken and fade. Even the closest relationships are subject to change, as loved ones may leave, grow apart, or pass away. If one ties to these things without understanding their impermanent nature, sorrow will follow when they change. This is not because relationships, possessions, or pleasures are wrong, but because they cannot bear the weight of eternal satisfaction. But eventually wither. To expect them to last forever is to set oneself against the very nature of life. The fleeting nature of pleasure can be seen in the way the mind always reaches for more. A delicious meal brings joy, but once it is eaten, entertainment excites the senses. But when it is over, the mind becomes restless again, searching for the next distraction. Even the most thrilling experiences, traveling to distant lands, enjoying luxuries, enjoy each ends, and the heart is left unsatisfied, craving another experience to fill the gap. This endless chase is proof that worldly pleasures, while pleasant, do not hold the power to give lasting peace, but clarity. When we see clearly that worldly things cannot provide lasting happiness, we are freed from the illusion that binds us to endless striving. Instead of clinging to each pleasure, fearing its loss, we can enjoy it with mindfulness, to rest, to love, to celebrate. These are natural and beautiful parts of life, but they are not the foundation of unshakable happiness. By recognizing their impermanence, we release the burden of expectation, and in that release, peace is born. And it's because it desires stability. It wants to hold on to pleasing and resist what is painful. But in reality, nothing stands still. Each moment passes into the next, each experience arises and fades away. Suffering, like trying to stop a river from moving, the wise approach is not to resist impermanence, but to live in harmony with it. When joy arises, enjoy the awareness, but do not cling. When sorrow arises, observe it with patience. It becomes balanced, and the endless roller coaster of highs and lows begins to calm. Impermanence can also be a teacher of compassion and humility. When we realize that everything we hold dear is fragile and changing, understanding that they too are subject to loss and change, we become less harsh in judgment and more tender in love, because we know that moments with others are fleeting and precious. Impermanence softens the heart. Anger or resentment for life is too short and happiness too precious to be squandered on bitterness. There is also freedom in seeing the impermanence of worldly pleasures. If pleasure were eternal, we would be forever bound to it. Because pleasures fade, they remind us to search deeper, to look beyond the surface. They teach us that there must be a happiness not dependent on conditions, a joy that does not fade with time. This recognition turns the heart inward, and compassion, which are not bound by impermanence in the same way material things are. Every person can observe this truth directly in their own life. Think of the joys that once felt essential but now are forgotten. The achievements that once seemed so important, the possessions that once brought pride. Where are they now? The memory may remain, but the pleasure they once gave has faded. And yet, despite this fading, the search continues. Or to see this finally bring what all the others could not. To see this cycle clearly is to step off the wheel of endless desire. It is to understand that while pleasures can be enjoyed, they are not the foundation of real happiness. It takes on a different flavor. There is less fear of loss, less desperation to cling, and more acceptance of the natural flow of existence. Moments of joy are appreciated for what they are, without the illusion that they will last forever. Difficult to endure with patience, knowing they too will pass. In this way, equanimity arises, a steady peace that does not depend on external conditions. A source of sorrow, but a reminder to look beyond them for something greater, something unshakable and pure. The human heart is often restless, forever chasing what is beyond its reach or lamenting what has already slipped away. To overlook the treasure that exists in the simple present moment, they imagine that happiness lies in some distant achievement or in the possession of things not yet gained. Yet when those things are acquired, the hunger continues and the search begins again. And mindfulness reveals another way of life where one learns to be fully present with what is here and now, appreciating it without greed or aversion. In this way, happiness is discovered not in distant goals, but in the immediacy of the moment. And lastly is the gentle art of being satisfied with what one has. It does not mean giving up effort or refusing to improve one's life, but it means releasing the belief that joy only comes when circumstances change. Sees that there's already enough in each moment to be grateful for the food on the table, the breath that sustains life, the warmth of the sun, the kindness of a friend. All these are treasures that, when recognized, bring joy. With contentment, even simplicity feels rich. The mind that is discontent is like a thirsty traveler drinking salty water. The more it drinks, the thirstier it becomes. It grasps at pleasures, possessions, and experiences Will finally quench the thirst, yet the thirst never ends because discontentment blinds the heart to the sufficiency of what is already here. Contentment, on the other hand, transforms the same world into a place of abundance, reveals the joy already present in ordinary life. This shift does not come from external change, but from an inner turning of the heart. Mindfulness is the companion of contentment. It is the practice of being full present with whatever is happening, without judgment, without running away into the past or future. Mindfulness brings clarity, for it allows one to see things as they truly are. In eating, mindfulness reveals the texture, flavor, and nourishment of the food. In walking, mindfulness awakens one to the simple miracle of movement, the touch of the earth beneath the feet, the rhythm of the body in motion. Every act, when performed with mindfulness, becomes an opportunity for joy, itchness. When the mind is lost in regret or worry, even beautiful experiences pass unnoticed. One may sit in a garden surrounded by flowers but fail to see their colors because the mind is elsewhere, but fail to taste the food or hear the words spoken because attention is divided. Life is precious, yet much of it is wasted in this way, lost to inattention. Mindfulness restores us to life, grounding us in the present. Gratitude naturally arises from contentment and mindfulness. When one is fully present, the small blessings of life reveal themselves and the heart feels thankful. Gratitude does not wait for extraordinary events. Blossoms in simple things, the breath moving in and out, the gift of sight and sound, the presence of people who gratitude deepens contentment, for it turns the focus away from what is lacking and toward what is already given. A grateful heart is a happy heart in the recognition of what is already abundant. The cultivation of contentment and mindfulness also protects against envy and comparison. Much unhappiness arises from measuring oneself against others, wishing for their possessions. This endless comparing leads only to dissatisfaction, for there will always be someone who appears to have more. Contentment dissolves this poison by reminding us that our life is enough as it is. If another is a distraction from living our own fully. When envy fades, peace returns, and happiness arises naturally. Contentment means passivity or laziness. It does not mean refusing to grow or improve. Rather, constant place of peace, not desperation. A content person can still work, create, and strive, but the striving is free of grasping, free of the belief that happiness lies only in the next accomplishment. In this way, even effort becomes joyful. The journey itself becomes fulfilling, not just the destination. Mindfulness also reveals the impermanent nature of all experiences. In paying attention, one sees that joy arises and fades, sorrow arises and fades. This understanding softens attachment, for it shows that clinging to any moment is futile. When the mind accepts impermanence with equanimity, it no longer resists change. This acceptance brings deep peace with the natural flow of life. In this way, mindfulness supports contentment, teaching the heart to rest in what is rather than yearning for what cannot last. Practicing mindfulness does not require retreating from the world. Washing dishes becomes a meditation when one feels the water, notices the movements, and breathes with awareness. Listening to a friend becomes mindfulness when one truly hears without distraction, without planning a reply. Sitting busy street becomes mindfulness when one notices the sounds, the people, the rhythm of steps. Through such practices, mindfulness weaves itself into the fabric of ordinary life, turning each moment into a doorway to happiness. The person who is content cannot be enslaved by desires. They are not constantly pulled this way and that by the promise of more. They are steady, balanced, at ease. Their joy does not depend on possessions, circumstances, or approval. For to rest in the moment as it is. This freedom is a form of wealth greater than gold, for it cannot be taken away by loss or change. When mindfulness and contentment work together, life is transformed. The restless chase for future satisfaction slows. The simple things, breath, sunlight, kindness, silence, are revealed as treasures. Gratitude fills the heart, and envy loses its grip. The endless comparing, craving, and grasping fade. Enduring, such happiness is not fragile, because it does not depend on external conditions, but on the clarity of seeing and the simplicity of being. Happiness is not an isolated experience that belongs only to the individual. Life, where the well-being of one is bound with the well-being of all. In the pursuit of happiness, many seek only their own gain, thinking that pleasure, wealth, or security attained for oneself alone will be enough. This is fragile, for it exists in separation and cannot endure. The teachings of compassion and wisdom show a different path, one where happiness arises not only from personal peace, but from the joy of living in harmony with others, guided by kindness. Compassion is the deep recognition of the suffering of others and the sincere wish to alleviate that suffering. It is not limited to friends or family, but extends to all beings, for all share the same desire to be free from pain and to live in peace. It naturally turns outward, seeking ways to bring comfort, relief, and kindness to others. In doing so, it also brings joy to oneself, for the act of helping, of caring, of loving without selfishness fills the heart with light. That it discover happiness that is profound and enduring, for it is not dependent on external pleasures, but arises from the noble act of giving. Wisdom complements compassion by providing clarity and understanding, leading to actions that, while well-intentioned, do not truly relieve suffering. Wisdom without compassion may become cold and detached, seeing the truth but failing to care. Together, compassion and wisdom create a balanced path, and the mind is guided by clarity. This union ensures that actions are both gentle and effective, rooted in love but directed by insight. Happiness arises here because one lives in alignment with truth and with the natural law of harmony. Compassion and in daily life. To refrain from harming, to speak truthfully, to act with integrity. These are not rules imposed from outside, but natural expressions of a heart that values both its own peace and the peace of others. Fear and regret. There is no hidden burden of deceit, no shadow of harm done to others. The heart rests light and untroubled, knowing that its actions have caused no unnecessary pain. It's itself a form of happiness. One is far deeper than the fleeting joy of indulgence or selfish gain. Compassion is not weakness, as some may think. It is strength, for open of others how the pain of others without turning away. To feel compassion is to acknowledge the reality of suffering, not to deny it or cover it up. Many people avoid compassion because it seems too heavy, too overwhelming. Instead, it transforms sorrow into motivation, inspiring one to act to serve to comfort. In this transformation, the heart discovers joy, for it realizes that it can make a difference, however small, in easing the burden of another. By reminding us of the nature of life, it sees that suffering arises from ignorance, craving, and clinging, and that all beings are caught in this cycle. With wisdom, faults or judge them harshly but understands that they too are struggling with their own burdens. This understanding softens anger, dissolves resentment, and opens the door to forgiveness. But the recognition that holding on to anger only deepens suffering. To release resentment is to free the heart, and in that freedom, happiness arises. Compassion and wisdom also reveal the interconnectedness of all life. Each life is part of a vast web of relationships. What we do affects others, and what others do affects us. To harm another is to harm oneself, for the ripples of that harm return. To help another is to help oneself. When this interconnectedness is truly seen, the illusion of separateness fades, and the heart naturally expands in love. Happiness deepens when it is shared, for the joy of one becomes the joy of many. Acts of compassion, a kind word, a gentle smile, a moment of listening, these may seem insignificant, yet they can lighten another's burden in ways unseen. Such acts also nourish the giver, for kindness leaves a sweetness in the heart. Unlike pleasures that fade, one may forget the details of a gift received, but one never forgets the warmth of kindness. In this way, compassion creates happiness that lingers, echoing long after the act is done. Wisdom also teaches balance in compassion. From the world, for suffering is part of the human journey. Without wisdom, compassion may become despair when faced with the vastness of pain. With wisdom, compassion remains steady, doing what it can without being overwhelmed. It's matter, and that one does not need to save the whole world to live meaningfully. The happiness here is quiet and steady, born of doing one's part without attachment to results. Moral conduct further supports this path by creating trust and harmony. Kindly becomes a source of safety for others. People feel at ease in their presence, for they know they will not be deceived or harmed. Such trust precious, for it allows relationships to flourish in honesty and respect. They also feel themselves carrying no burden of guilt or shame. This harmony with others and with oneself is a deep form of happiness, one that cannot be bought or faked but must be lived. Compassion is also a practice of letting go of selfishness. What do I lose? It measures every action by its own advantage. This narrowness breeds discontent, for the self is never satisfied. Compassion, on the other hand, turns the gaze outward, asking, what does this being need? The grip of selfishness loosens and the heart becomes spacious. A spacious heart is a happy heart, for it is no longer trapped in the endless cycle of me and mine. Wisdom supports this by showing that the self itself is not fixed or solid. It's a collection of conditions, body, thoughts, feelings, memories that arise and pass away. To cling tightly to this self is to create endless fear and craving. Wisdom loosens this clinging. Rules between self and others are not as rigid as they seem. When the illusion of separateness fades, compassion flows naturally, for others are no longer seen as distant but as part of the same living reality. In this vision, the one Sabbath expands with the joy of all beings. The practice of compassion and wisdom is also the practice of patience. When faced with anger, the compassionate heart does not retaliate but understands. When faced with difficulty, sees it as part of the path. Patience brings peace, for it prevents the fires of anger and frustration from consuming the heart. In patience, one finds freedom from the tyranny of reaction, and in that freedom, happiness is discovered. Practice of mindfulness. When one is mindful, one notices the needs of others more clearly, the pain in their eyes, the unspoken longing in their hearts. Compassion responds to this awareness with kindness, driven by impulse, but by clarity. Mindfulness, compassion, and wisdom together create a life of presence, care, and understanding. A life where happiness is cultivated moment by moment through loving awareness is different from the joy of sensory pleasures. Sensory pleasures are fleeting, bound by conditions, and often followed by craving for more. The joy of compassion is self-renewing. The more it is given, the more it grows, for it is rooted in truth, which does not change. Together, they create a happiness that is resilient, able to withstand loss, change, and hardship. Even in the midst of suffering, compassion brings purpose, and wisdom brings perspective. To despair, when compassion and wisdom are cultivated together, life becomes a gift not only for oneself, but for all who are touched by it. Each thought, word, and kindness and understanding becomes a seed of happiness planted in the world. These seeds may blossom in ways unseen, but their fragrance spreads, creating ripples of peace. Happiness is not something to be hoarded, but something that grows by being shared. In giving joy, one receives joy. In caring for others, one cares for oneself. Happiness is not found in the restless pursuit of possessions, recognition, for these pass away like shadows in the sun. It is discovered in the stillness of the heart that is free from craving, in the wisdom that sees the impermanence of all things, mindfulness that allows one to rest in the present moment, and in the boundless compassion and clarity that embrace all beings with kindness. When the mind is no longer enslaved by desire, when the heart no longer clings to what cannot last, and when life is guided by compassion and wisdom, then happiness is no longer distant or fragile. It arises naturally, quietly, deeply, and it endures. This is the happiness that nourishes the self and others, the happiness that is unshaken by change, the happiness that reflects the truth of life itself.